Now, in some rare good news for the Liberal Party on the weekend, there was a 3% swing to the Libs in the Tasmanian state election. It's not certain, though, that the Liberal government, led by the then Premier Jeremy Rockliff, will be returned, because under Tasmania's bizarre Hare-Clark voting system, even a primary vote of 40%, which is what the Libs got, won't normally lead to a majority of seats. Still, even though it's a left-green sort of crossbench, they'd be incurring electoral wrath if they supported Labor, which went backwards by some 3%, and with just a primary vote of 26%, had its worst vote in history. And having repeatedly sworn no deals with the Greens either, if Labor leader Dean Winter then did one in order to seize government, it would be an utterly brazen breach of faith. And yet that might still happen. It's a little too early to tell. A little later in the show, we'll speak with the Tasmanian Senator John O'Donoghue for the latest. Unlike the recent federal campaign, in this one, the Tasmanian Liberals had three things going for them. First, they knew what they were against: an opportunistic Labor opposition forcing voters back to the polls early in a crass attempt to grab power. Secondly, the Liberals knew what they were for: building a new state-of-the-art football stadium, because if Tassie is going to be a proper state, it needs proper infrastructure. And they were also focused throughout the term on growing the state's tourism and business opportunities, respecting its natural beauty, sure, but not locking it up as some sort of nature park where people stand still and live on welfare. And third, the Liberals had the advantage of incumbency. In difficult times, it helps to have a leader who's a known quantity to voters. After more than a decade of Liberal rule, Rockliff has the lowest unemployment in Tasmania of any Premier and the highest business confidence in the country. So while, to paraphrase Mark Twain, reports of the Liberal Party's death have been greatly exaggerated, and Tasmania is certainly a bright spot, outside of the Apple Isle, things look pretty grim. In part because the federal Liberals are yet to work out what they're for and what they're against. And to be honest, reviewing themselves around and round in circles doesn't help. Now, yes, a serious campaign review is absolutely needed, but multiple reviews at a federal level, as well as a whole lot of different reviews at a state level, well, they risk of being an excuse for inertia. And with obsessions like gender quotas and US-style primaries to choose the next round of candidates, it can easily look like the Liberals are only focused on the internals of the party and what might impact them as politicians, rather than what's facing Australian families and small businesses. And if you want more evidence of that navel-gazing and how it's hurting the Libs, take a look at two polls out today. Both the Australian and the Nine newspapers have the Coalition's primary vote pegged at just 29%. Now, 29%, I don't think federally it's ever been lower. Now, in terms of Newspoll, Labor's two-party preferred margin's up to a whopping 57-43. That's a 2-point improvement since the election. And that's a mountain for Susan Lee and her team to climb, particularly when you factor in the massive seat haul that Labor picked up in May. So this is why the Libs have to get down to business and fast. Now that the Parliament's back and Labor starts to push on with its agenda, whether Australians voted for it or not. Believe me, the more time the Libs spend talking about themselves, be that quotas or anything else, the more they'll wallow. Because voters, male or female, don't respond to anything that looks self-indulgent or an excuse for not having a view on the big issues facing our country. It would be a catastrophic mistake if the Coalition let all their various reviews into policy and the election result keep them out of the political debate for the next 12 months. Now, as of tomorrow, when the Parliament sits, they'll need a position on all the legislation that Labor's going to bring forward, like taxing unrealised capital gains. Good on Susan Lee today for her statement that the opposition, she said, would fight every step of the way on policy that's against the national interest.
If they bring forward legislation that is not in the national interest and it is not in the interests of Australians, then we will fight them every step of the way.
And she should certainly ignore Anthony Albanese's attacks. The Libs should, he says, just get out of his way, because the first job of opposition is to oppose bad policy. But I've been really disappointed by the way the opposition's failed to seize the ground on the crisis in childcare, an area where the government has profoundly let families down, with at least 4 weeks now of arrests and charges against multiple childcare workers. Now, to be fair, Lee has called these alleged crimes an incredible betrayal that she says leaves her feeling physically sick. And she's written to the Prime Minister offering bipartisan support for fast-tracking legislation such as a national register of childcare workers. But as a former childcare minister herself, she's missed a big opportunity to be more of a leader in this and hasn't, has she, flagged new policy. And there's plenty of it, such as giving parents more options than just heavily corporatised and unionised childcare centres. Now, as Liberals, it's a no-brainer that they start to push for families to get childcare funding paid directly to them, to give parents the choice that they need to get the care that best suits their family, be that in a formal childcare setting or in the family home. Then there's all the issues around the US alliance, triggered by the current government's obvious discomfort with the Trump administration. Now, plainly, Anthony Albanese, full of his Beijing bravado, thinks he can remake the US alliance despite what the ANZUS Treaty might say on the matter. Today he told the Australian newspaper that he was going to make, quote, the Americans, he'll tell them, make it clear to them about what we can do and what we can't do. If that includes that we can't increase defence spending much beyond 2% of GDP, well, then our alliance with the US is on life support at best. And the PM is still insisting that he'll meet Donald Trump on the sidelines of some other meeting rather than meet him at the White House. So after a 6-day visit to China, he's hoping for, 6 minutes in a corridor or in the bathroom at some international talk fest? I mean, honestly, that shows a weak PM who's scared of a face-off with the US president accustomed to speaking his mind. A PM who hopes if he does it this way, he perhaps can avoid media scrutiny of what's said in the room. So enough of the hand-wringing, Liberals. You've got a PM flailing around on national security and the security of our children in a childcare system that we all pay as taxpayers $16 billion a year to fund. Use your leverage. And while you're at it, with yet another offshore wind farm falling over last week and countless others in limbo, let's have a fair dinkum debate on net zero that your supporters so desperately want. Because the best way for the Libs to regain their standing with voters is for them to give the Australian people the leadership that they're not getting from the current government.